Hello, YouTube viewers. Thank you for tuning into my channel, CCM Drummer. My name is Matthew Jackson, and I'd like to continue my series on the history of CCM, or what we would say contemporary Christian music, and this would, of course, be part 3. In part 1, I established that CCM was really birthed out of two movements that preceded CCM. The first would be the hippie movement, and then from the hippie movement came the Jesus People movement, and then from the Jesus People movement came CCM. So it was a sort of an evolution there. In part 2 of this series, I established that the period of the 70s was really the incubation period for CCM music. That's when it was getting developed, and it really didn't spread its wings and soar until the 80s. So the 70s was a period of its getting together. Now, one of the things I told you about in the period of the 70s that they didn't really have a top 10, top 40, top 20, a Billboard type thing like they do for secular genre music. For CCM, that just didn't exist at that time. It didn't exist until 1978. 1978 was really the first time that we had something where they would track, where they would chart the albums, and of course that the rankings would be based on airplay, albums, record sales. And what I want to do, let me just read to you what the top 20 in 1978. Who was on the top 20 in 1978. And I'm going to start from the 20 and then work up to the number 1. Okay? So we had First Butterfly by the Boons, Wind on Summer Nights by Wall Brothers, never heard of those guys, Making Melodies in My Heart, Honey Tree, I Wish You Jesus, Scott Wesley Brown, Building Block, Neil Paul Stokely, Brand New Life, Wendell Burton, Now I See the Man, Chris Christian, Gathering His Name, Steve Camp, Beautiful Music, Amy Grant, You Took My Heart by Surprise, The Boons, Pleasure Serving You, Jamie Owens Collins, that was the number 10, and then number 9 is More Than Conquerors by Janie, All Day Dinner, Reba Rambo, Fresh Surrender, The Archers, and then I'm a Believer, The Boons, What a Difference You've Made in My Life, Amy Grant, Sail On, The Imperials, Old Man's Rubble, Amy Grant, Mansion Builder, second chapter of Acts, and then coming in at number 1, He Is Alive by Don Francisco. So back in 1978, that's what passed for CCM at the time. Now, most of those songs, if you were to establish a spectrum, so on one end of the spectrum, you had the traditional slow, boring music, and then on the other end of the spectrum, you had the high energy rock and roll music. Okay, all these songs that I just named for you would probably fall somewhere in the middle, more towards the traditional side. That's basically where the needle was at that time. Now, as time went on, the needle started to move slowly this way, but it took a while. But that was what it was like in 1978. So yeah, if you were a Christian and you wanted to appeal to non-Christians who were listening to rock and roll, you probably wouldn't. The secular non-rock and roll people probably wouldn't think much of these artists. They would probably think they're boring and wouldn't appeal to them. Okay, but that's where we were at that time. Now, what I want to do is I want to talk to you about my experiences with some of the CCM artists of that day. Now, I had a unique experience and a unique advantage in getting to know some of the artists or see some of the artists in concert because I was, at the time, I was going to school in Lindale, Texas, which is just slightly north of Tyler, Texas, and about 80 miles east of Dallas, in East Texas here. And so from 77 to 82, I was attending a school called Agape Force Training Institute. And I was able to see some of these artists. And it was really interesting because that Lindell area kind of became an enclave of CCM artists, because you had Keith Green, who had his headquarters there. You had Second Chapter of Acts. You had Dallas Home, Barry McGuire, Harvest. And then, of course, the Agape Force Ministries, they produced groups like Silverwind, which came out in 1980, and a group before that was Candle. You also had Candle. Candle was more to the mellower traditional side, because they basically did praise music, ministered in churches, but they also did a lot of children's albums. If you've heard of The Music Machine, that went platinum. Bullfrogs and Butterflies, I think that went gold. Sir Oliver's Songs and Nathaniel the Grublet, those were the most notable music products that Candle produced. And of course, they were targeting Gen Xers at that time, but those albums did quite well. But one artist that I got to see a lot of was Keith Green. And I think I enrolled in the Agape Force Training Institute in the fall of 1977. I think in October, maybe November, something like that. Keith Green did a concert there on campus, on the Agape Force campus. And of course, his audience wasn't just Agape Force Training Institute students and Agape Force people. It was everybody in that general area, because a lot of people came to our Tuesday night specials and to hear different speakers and different groups and stuff like that. So it was widespread in terms of the audience. But Keith did a concert there, and when Keith did his concerts, it was just Keith and him playing the piano. He did not have a rhythm section. Now, I also saw Keith a lot at the music festivals, because during my tenure in the Agape Force Training Institute, I was also part of a drama group where we performed in the children's tent, but we also had VIP credentials, and we had per diem privileges, and would eat at the same restaurants that many of the artists who performed on the main stage at these Jesus festivals played at. And I saw Keith Green there as well. He performed, and we even I saw him eat in the same restaurant we were eating at. One thing that was really peculiar about Keith, he did have some eccentricities about him. He was a very down-to-earth guy, but he was a little eccentric in some areas. And one area I noticed in particular is when Keith went to the salad bar to get his salad. Usually you eat your salad before you eat your main meal. So Keith goes to the salad bar, he loads his plate up. So here's his plate, right? And his salad was literally stacked. I'm not kidding, I'm not exaggerating. It was a foot tall. I mean, he really stacked that lettuce and tomatoes and cheese, salad dressing, and all the things and trimmings that you put on a salad that are in a salad bar. He actually stacked it up really high. And I was watching him go back to his table to go eat with the entourage that he was with. And I nudged the guy next to me and I said, doesn't Keith know that you can make multiple trips to the salad bar? You don't have to load up your plate like that. But yeah, that was kind of weird. At the Agape Force Training Institute, we have a gymnasium. We had a lounge with a pool table, ping pong table, and a TV. And on occasions, you would see Keith there with with people from his ministry, using our recreational facilities. And so Keith was very available. I could have easily walked up to him and introduced myself to him and got, struck up a conversation had I made the effort to do it, but I just didn't. I just said, well, that's Keith, and I didn't think anything of it at the time. I didn't know he was going to die at age 29 in a plane crash and become a legend. It was just Keith. And the only time Keith and I ever had where we actually exchanged words, it only happened one time. And on the campus of the Agape Force Ministries, we had a sort of a restaurant called Grublet's Hideaway. And I was working on a Saturday night at the Grublet's Hideaway doing my shift, and I was handling the ice cream parlor part, and he came up to me and ordered a double scoop ice cream, but he didn't want it on a cone. He wanted it in a plastic dish, and he asked me to squirt some chocolate syrup on it, which is sort of unusual because it wasn't on the menu. But hey, I can be flexible. If he doesn't want a cone, that's okay with me. So I charged him the price of what a double cone would have been, and I gave him the price. I forgot what the price was. I don't know what the going rate for double cones were back in those days, but I gave him the price. He gave me the money. I gave him his change and said, "Thank you very much. Enjoy your ice cream." And that was it. That's the only time Keith and I ever spoke. But Keith, his concerts, he always challenged people to deepen their walk in faith in the Lord. He talked a lot about revival and what it took and what sacrifices that we would have to make in order to achieve revival. Leonard Ravenhill also lived in that area at the time. Now, you got to remember, when I say in the area, I mean, we're talking 2 or 3 miles up the road from where I was living on the Agape Forest campus, okay? I mean, we're talking Highway 110, 2 or 3 miles up the road, very close. So, yeah, it was that close. In fact, I've even been to his ministry over there and met some of his people, Last Days Ministry. In 1977, Keith and Melody Green named their ministry Last Days Ministry. That was like 40 years ago, when they were picking out that name. I wonder if they ever thought that their ministry would be 40 years, because it's 2017 at the time I'm recording this video. So, yeah, a little strange, but that's okay. I don't know I don't know what last days mean, but are we still in the last days? I don't know. Anyway, but yeah, in 1982, in the summer of 1982, Keith's plane crash. He was going for a joyride in his airplane, or in an airplane that was at his ministries, and of course him and his entourage died in that plane crash, and it was very devastating for us all. I was just finishing up my studies in the Agape Force Training Institute and was about to leave, but I was still there at the time. And I went to Keith's memorial service, and Leonard Ravenhill presided over that memorial service, and Keith and his 2 kids who died with him were buried there in Garden Valley off Highway 110. So, yeah, very sad time. But that's the extent of my encounter with Keith Green. Very down-to-earth guy, little eccentric, but it was sad to see him die at such a young age, at age 29. But anyway, that's about all I got to say about Keith. One more thing I wanted to mention about Keith. One of the things that kind of impressed me about him, he was the only Christian artist that I know that actually pulled his albums off the bookshelves at the bookstores and didn't market and sell his albums through the traditional way that you would market and sell your albums at that time. And I think in 1981 or 82, I forgot when he made this decision, but he decided if somebody wanted one of his albums, they would have to write his ministry and request one and enclose a donation for any amount that they see fit or none at all, and they would get the album. So that's how they distributed and marketed their material, their albums in their later years. Now, in 1977, when he was a fledgling artist, just upcoming, he didn't do that. His stuff was sold on the regular market. But yeah, later on in his ministry, he decided to not charge for his concerts and not charge an exact price for his albums and do the commercial thing like so many artists did at that time. So that was sort of interesting. And Last Days Ministries had a monthly newsletter. Keith was a prolific writer as well. He wrote a lot of articles. So his ministry was not just with his music and his concerts, but also Last Days Ministries had a newsletter, and I probably still have one today. I'm not sure, but so anyway, that's the extent of my knowledge and encounter with Keith Green, and in my next video, I'll talk to you about some of the other artists that I came in contact with. So thank you for watching. Please feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel and watch some of my drum covers. Thank you very much. Thank you for watching.